I'm Laura Cross of Rebel Seed Films and Entertainment. I'm the writer and producer of the short action war drama Devil Dogs. And in this special podcast, I have a conversation with an actor from the film. Joining me as co-host on this episode is Lindsay Holt, director of Devil Dogs. And today we're talking with John Pistone, who plays Sergeant O'Brien in Devil Dogs. John is an actor, writer, producer, and sports enthusiast. He's also a combat veteran, a U.S. Navy combat cameraman, an expert marksman, and an avid motorcyclist. Hey, John, welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you here.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So I want to just jump back to the beginning before we get into Devil Dogs and ask you about your childhood, what your life was like when you were young, where you grew up, what your path trajectory was then.
I grew up in Arkansas, in a small town in Arkansas for the most part. My dad was in the military, and then once he got out of the military, he made a living out of getting married and divorced, so we traveled the country quite a bit. But for the most part, we always returned back to Arkansas. I played a lot of sports. Football's life there. Got into acting at an early age. Was in my first stage production at the age of 5. Was a musical tribute to Walt Disney, and I kind of developed my love for performing arts there. I had an uncle who was pretty active in the performing arts. He still is. He writes and produces and acts, and Arkansas has taught for years. So, yeah.
So the military and the theater was always with you from a young age. So
yes.
Your father, was he in the Navy, the same as you, or?
No, he was in the Air Force.
He was in the Air Force.
Yeah.
And what was it like being raised by a military man?
It was interesting. It was pretty strict. He was also a minister, so that made things doubly strict at home.
Wow, what a combination.
Yeah. And he had served either 3 or 4 tours of duty in Vietnam. I'm not sure on the exact number. And that affected him quite a bit, which I didn't understand when I was younger. I do now, understand it more now. But yeah, it was pretty strict. I mean, we were at church 3-4 times a week and that type of stuff. So, there were definitely rules laid out and needed to be followed.
If you don't mind me asking, John, what was the denomination your father was in?
It was non-denominational, like Assemblies of God.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And did you know then from a young age that you wanted to go into the military, or did you know you wanted to act and be in film, or was there a pull, or were you on some other track?
No, I always wanted to perform. I always wanted to act. The only other thing I wanted to do was military or police work. And I was going to join. I moved out of the house when I was 15, and when I was 18, I was going to join the Marines, but because I had left high school and was a GED student, they wouldn't allow me. And at the same time, I was doing some theater projects, so I kind of got more involved in theater and doing other things then instead of pursuing the military route. And that didn't happen again until later on in life where I actually joined.
So tell us about that. Tell us about joining the Navy.
Yeah, I joined the Navy when I was 30 years old. Had done pretty much everything I wanted to do in life up to that point, and felt that I'd taken a lot from the country, not really given anything back. And on a whim, basically stopped by a Navy recruiting station in Los Angeles and said, hey, if you guys can use any of the skills that I have that I've gained over the years, I'd love to utilize them in the military. Started as a reservist and then went active duty and did a full 10 years in the Navy.
Wow.
And
That's impressive.
What was your role? What are some memorable experiences?
When I first joined, the goal was to get into combat camera. It's the one that appealed to me the most. But I had to start in the public affairs office, which was doing the Hollywood to the Navy type stuff. I worked in that public affairs office here in Los Angeles, where we would go over scripts and we'd go on the set of like JAG and NCIS and things like that and make sure that everything was up to par with what the Navy wanted to represent. We do these Hollywood to the Navy tours and change of command ceremonies and things like that, where we take people from the Hollywood business down to San Diego and take them on a tour of on an aircraft carrier or a submarine or something like that. And then after about a year and a half, I finally was able to transition over and go into combat camera. And that's what I did for the remainder of my time in the military.
So what did that actually entail, combat camera?
There's a lot of facets to it. The purpose of combat camera is we get attached to a unit that is in conflict, and we'll go on a mission, and we either document the mission, we participate in the mission and document it. We do video support, photo support, and also write as well. And then there are times where you work in a public affairs office where you're dealing with military embeds, and you're writing stories, and then there's another aspect where you're doing stuff for the Armed Forces Network, and you're doing news releases and video and stuff like that. It's kind of a broad spectrum of what you get to do in it. But I like it because I really liked it because I didn't have to do any sea duty. There's no combat on the ship, so I didn't really have to spend any time out to sea as most do in most rates. So
when you joined the Navy to see the world, you actually did. You didn't just see the sea, right?
That is correct.
And when you said that you were actually working with some embeds, that meant that you were escorting other journalists, other photojournalists? Yeah,
a lot of times what will happen is you'll get say a reporter from CNN or something like that wants to document what's going on. They want to tell a story, so they have to have basically a bodyguard, babysitter, whatever you want to call it, a guide to be with them at all times. Partly to make sure that we know the narrative that's being told, that they're telling the right story, they're hopefully showing the military in the best light, but also to make sure that they don't get hurt, they don't go outside the bounds of where they should go, so that they don't get injured or anything like that.
So what are some of the places that you went to during this work?
I was fortunate. I got to travel quite a bit. I went to Korea, El Salvador on missions. I went to Kuwait and Iraq twice. And then we stopped in Germany. We were in Ireland. We've done a layover in Romania and Bulgaria, and been to Amsterdam, and all over. Pretty much
all over.
Yeah.
Where did you go in Iraq? Can you share those stories with us or those experiences?
Sure. I was based in Baghdad, but depending on the mission, we would travel anywhere. So I got to go. I'm actually one of the people, and there's several, who's been fortunate enough to be in every city in Iraq at one point. So I've seen every town, every city in Iraq. I got to travel the whole country. I was there for the first time I was there in 2003. I was in Kuwait. We went across during the initial push with the unit to secure the oil platforms, and then I went back again in 2005 and was there for 13 months until 2006.
Wow. And was there any particular battles that you covered or incidents that stick with you?
It's combat, so there's a lot of incidents that stick with you. It is what it is. So in particular, no, a lot of the missions that we went on are the purpose of us going on them is really to document it for internal use within the military. It doesn't get released to the public for many, 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 many years, if at all. So
I see. So you were in for 10 years, and then what happened when you left the Navy?
I was injured, so I was given kind of a choice of getting a desk job and working back in public affairs and basically not being in the field anymore, or take a retirement, and so that's what I did. And then I was kind of lost for a couple of years when I got out because felt disconnected from my unit and from the guys and from being able to do what I thought that I was going to do for the rest of my life. Took a couple of security gigs, worked in Russia for 7 months, and then realized the only other thing I really liked was performing. So I started studying and training as an actor and as a performer.
So was this the first time that you had gone back to acting, or were you still doing some before you joined the Navy?
I've always done some kind of acting. I've always found a stage or a short film or something to get involved with. Even while we were in Iraq, between missions, there was a group of us. We got together, about 15 of us, and we put on the first live play since the fall of Saddam, and we did it in Baghdad, and it was difficult because we were all doing different missions, and Army, there's Army, Air Force, all types of people, and so it wasn't a regular play. It was a series of basically like monologues and short scenes. And it was called Bigfoot Stole My Wife, that were all based from the World Weekly News. It's a comedic thing based on fake news reports from the World Weekly News.
Well, it sounds like there's a movie in there, John.
So it was fun. Like I said, it was its first performance ever done in Iraq since Saddam fell, and it was a good time. And we had 4 shows, and so I've always, like I said, always found some way to find a stage or to do something, whether it be writing something, shooting something, or acting in something.
So you're kind of an all-around film guy. You like directing, you like writing, and you also act. Is there one in particular that pulls you more than another?
I mean, in an ideal world, I would, have the freedom, like a lot of people, to do all of it. I love acting. I love performing. There's, as you probably know, there's something about producing that is extremely appealing to me. I'm somewhat of a control freak over myself, and tend to be kind of, take charge kind of person, which is good and bad at a lot of times. So it's hard for me to relinquish control, which you have to do in the other areas of
I never would have known that about you, John.
Yeah, I know, it's odd. It's odd. So when it comes to producing, that's the other aspect. I mean, I write, but there's much better screenwriters out there than me. There's probably much better actors and producers as well. But there's the only other thing other than acting would be producing, because it's it's pulling together a lot of creative people, keeping them on the same track, letting them do what they do, but keeping the singularity of vision. I kind of like that, watching something go from just words on a page or somebody's idea all the way to where it's in the can, and knowing that I've kind of shepherded that. That's always a good feeling.
And what's great, too, is like you said, you are in control. You're not waiting for someone to put a project together for you and call you up. You're actually,
exactly.
Yeah, you're the architect of that yourself and making sure it happens. So when you got out of the Navy and you got back onto this path, did you get a manager, an agent? Was this something you were still doing on the side, or was it full-time now?
No, it's something I started a sports company down in San Diego for adults, co-ed pickup sports, and just out of necessity. I wanted to get around people and start playing sports again, coming off my injury, and that turned in what was a hobby turned into a business. And so I had that business running, and I decided to, if I was going to pursue acting full time, to do what the military trained us to do, which is, if you want to be good at something, you train at it. You constantly train at it. And don't try to do it unless you've been well trained on how to do it. So I signed up for a local community college there with the intent on getting a degree in theater, and that's what I did. I started training, and I did nothing but train for 6 years, just about 5-6 years. I mean, I'd take like a short film here, a play here, but the focus was on training and learning the craft of acting, and not just thinking that I knew it, but actually training myself in it. And that's before I moved up to Los Angeles. So I did that, was in school there, was constantly training with teachers, and then I decided to finish my degree by going to a conservatory up here in Los Angeles. And so I did. I went to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts and graduated early in May, and spent 2 years doing, once again, nothing but training on the craft of acting and storytelling.
Mm-hmm. And so what's your goals with your career? Are you looking to just continue to make your own type of films, collaborate with others? You do have a manager or agent now, right?
I do now, yes, I do now. Since I got out of college, I was able to secure a really good manager. I've actually got a management team that I work with, and they've been great in terms of helping me get, in the right doors that I needed to get into, and it's getting there. The trajectory is where I want it to go. Where do I see myself? No, I like the collaboration process. Once again, ideally, acting is the first and foremost focus for me. But I'm talking right now with a couple people up producing some projects. One of them happens to be the guy that wrote Die Hard and Commando and that type of thing. I'm working with their company. So we might develop a project through that. Well, and that's just on the side, yeah.
So you introduced Lindsay and I to a wonderful organization for veterans in the film industry. What would you have to say to people who are in the military who want to get into filmmaking or who want to be in front of the camera about the best path to take?
First and foremost, just like I said before, train. Mm-hmm. Know that it's just because you've got a good-looking face or you've done a few acting things here or there doesn't mean that you know what you're doing. There's set etiquette. There's things that you need to learn about, working on the camera as opposed to working on stage. So obviously train. Find yourself good teachers, good coaches, good ways to train and hone your craft, and don't stop doing that. Second thing that I would do is what you touched on. There's a good networking group here called Veterans in Film and Television. And their whole focus is to bring veterans who have a desire to work in this industry, bring them together and let them meet other veterans that are doing it and put them in connection with other companies that are looking for veterans. And it's just a networking organization. They're not going to promise you a job or get you anything, but a lot of things have happened through this organization. And a lot of people have gotten work. A lot of people have created work. There's a screenwriting mentorship through the Screenwriting Guild through them. There's a Take Your Six campaign that's partnered with them, which goes into studios, and you're talking with writers about changing the narrative of how veterans are portrayed in television and film. So the opportunities are there, but get involved in the group and get involved in any group that you can, the VFW, the American Legion. Network, is the key to the business here. Knowing is not just knowing as many people in the business as you can, having them know you and having them see you and get to know you as a person. Because the bottom line in any industry is that people work with people they like, people they know. It's not any different in Hollywood. You're going to get your best roles out of people that know you. You're going to get your best agents out of somebody who's actually known you or through a friend. And that's just the way it works here.
Yeah, that's great advice, which brings us to Devil Dogs. You play O'Brien. You didn't start out playing O'Brien. You had another role.
No, I did not.
And actually, before that, we didn't even have a role for you in the film. But you were very proactive, and you reached out to us because you wanted to be involved with the project because it was a military film. And you and Lindsay ended up connecting. I got an email from you. I sent it on to Lindsay, and I think he called you, and the two of you started communicating. Lindsay, do you want to chime in on that and talk about how you and John first connected and how his role evolved?
Well, the thing that I remember about the first conversation I had with John was that he was very adamant about riding his bike up there. And I thought that was great because he has a motorcycle and he wanted to arrive on the motorcycle and depart on it every day. And I wanted to insist that he take a hotel room, and he said, no, I'm more comfortable. So right away I knew we had a guy who was an independent thinker and likes to do things in a certain way that he's comfortable with, and I'm just glad that we pursued it. What did you think of the set, John? Having spent so much time as you have, and I didn't know that until I just heard it a few minutes ago. You've been in every city in Iraq of consequence. Mm-hmm. What was your impression of the set at the Blue Cloud Movie Ranch that we had?
It was spot on. It was exactly in terms of the architecture and the layout and everything like that. It's exactly what you'll find in any town in Iraq. It was spot on. It's very accurate. They've done a really good job at making sure that it looks accurate. And it does. Mm-hmm. It creates the environment, and I think that puts you in a certain mood and puts you in a certain tone even before you start shooting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I kind of felt the same way.
I think it really helped the actors to feel like, they were there. But even predating you being on the set, in that first conversation, you did end up changing the script. The conversation that you had with Lindsay, he came back to me and he said, John was this camera combat guy, and he says, we can't have a character who's not escorted as a photojournalist in the film. And we ended up we changed the script for that, and I think we changed it for the better. So you were already impacting the script and the film and the direction of everything just from your initial conversations with Lindsay. And then when you came to the rehearsal, by then we had written a part for you. You were initially the colonel's assistant, and you came prepared, and you were wonderful. And during rehearsal, you were very helpful in actually redoing a lot of the scenes to make sure that they were much more authentic to the way that the military would really be. You want to speak to that, John?
Sure. Well, first of all, I was very fortunate. I was, as you know, and for the audience, I was researching films that I want to be involved in, and I think as more advice to people that want to do this for a living, you have to be proactive with your career. Yes, your manager's going to get you in the door. Yes, your agent's going to get you some work, but none of that will happen as well as you promoting yourself and being proactive. And I was looking at films that were in development that I would say, hey, I'd like to be a part of. I came across your story, and I went to your website and researched you guys and researched the project. And it was something I felt passionate about in being able, I wanted to help any way I could just because this was something that I've done. Being a combat cameraman, I've been there. I know what it's like. And anything I could help do, and I was fortunate, that you guys responded to my email. It was a shot in the dark. It has a 1 in a million chance. And I'm thankful for that. And then in the early conversations, for me, it was like, hey, anything I can do. You don't have to write a role. It's just anything I can do to help. And then it developed into a role, which is, once again, beyond my wildest expectations, especially as an actor. And then when you guys called me in and we did the first rehearsal, it's always a fine line when you come from the military and you see things the military portrayed on television or film. There's a critic is always going to find something wrong. This is not exact because you do have to consider that it's still a storytelling. You're still telling a story, and not everything's going to be 100% accurate because they have to tell a story and they have to keep an audience engaged. So it's always a fine line on what do you, when you're talking with pre-production, when you're doing military advising, which I've done some before, is that, what do you want to see? You want to see the way the military would do it, or do you want to see something that looks similar to your vision, and we can try to work with the military thing around it? And that's kind of what happened is you guys will attest to in a lot of things. There were some things that visually for your storytelling that were necessary for you guys to see that weren't maybe technically accurate. But the purpose of me kind of helping out was to say, not everything may be technically accurate, but let's try to make it look as accurate as we can, given the parameters that we have. And you guys allowed me to step in and do that, which, once again, was wonderful. It was a great opportunity.
Well, it was a good opportunity for us as well because we really did want to be as accurate as possible. And like you said, it is a fine line. There's certain things that, for the storytelling, maybe, or for the visual that we want, or for the budget that we have, it has to be a certain way or and we can be somewhat flexible about that. I think both Lindsay and I agree that we wish we had spent more time in pre-production and working with you and some of the other military consultants to make it even more accurate. And at this point, we feel that what we have created is really, it's a short film version, a digital sketch, so to speak, of what the feature or the series will be. And then we'll be even more accurate about all of the details.
Sure, and you look at even some of the major blockbuster films. I want to say it was the one with the bomber. I can't think of his name right now. They had their names on the front of their helmets, which would never happen. But the filmmaker had to do that so that the audience could tell which actor was which. Otherwise, you lose them in the story. It would never happen in combat. You never put your name on the front of your helmet. But they had to have that, and that's a major feature film. Like military guys would say, that's not right. But you have to understand that the audience, everybody looks exactly the same in their uniform from a distance.
I think you're referring to the Hurt Locker, right?
The Hurt Locker, yes, thank you. And there were a couple scenes where their name was on the front of their helmet, but that was to identify them for the audience. Otherwise, the audience would lose it. And that's what, in the Veterans and Film Television group, and we talk about constantly, is like, look, you have to take a step back sometimes and go, we got to let some things slide because it's necessary for the storytelling process. And I think, for the most part, what you guys have done with Devil Dogs, and I haven't seen any footage, but from being there, you worked very hard to make sure everything was as accurate as it could be. And that's, you do the best with what you have, and hopefully the audience will accept that maybe not everything's 100%, but that was necessary for that story because it happens on every level of filmmaking. Mm-hmm. You can't make it 100% accurate.
And I think I think it's challenging for a military audience to feel that way because in the military, obviously, all of the details are so important. You cannot be off about things because it's life or death. And,
that's exactly it.
Right. So that is the kind of feedback, some of the feedback that we get. And our hope is that people will be able to forgive us for some of the little mistakes and tune into the story. And then, as we said, this is a short film version. It is just a digital sketch. And when we go to the feature or the full series, we're really going to do our best to get everything as accurate as
Of course, and you guys worked really hard to make sure everything's accurate, so that if it is something that's inaccurate, it's a little thing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's you worked really hard to make sure the big things were covered, and that's something that a lot of people don't even do.
Yeah. So you play O'Brien, who is the sergeant. It's a very important role because he's the leader of the squad, and we're following a fire team. We're following one of the fire teams in the film, and he's the eldest and he's the leader. And you actually did not prepare for that role. You had prepared for the colonel's assistant, and on the first day of shooting, we made some changes in actors, and we just threw you into that role, and you did a phenomenal job. So normally I would ask, what attracted you to this character, and how did you prepare for it? But you didn't prepare. You just seemed to step into it. So can you talk to us about that?
It's, once again, I'm fortunate that you guys were, through situations which happen on every film and every production and everything in life, things change, and you have to be ready to step in when called upon, which thankfully I had the military training to prepare me for that type of stuff. So, and the acting training that was, that kind of prepared me that, hey, things can change on a dime, and just be ready to roll with it. Yeah, it's, once again, fortunate you guys gave me the opportunity based on circumstances, and hope that I was able to deliver. But it's, once again, a lesson for everybody as well as myself is to always be prepared. That you never know what's going to happen. And 99% of everything in life is just being there and showing up and being ready to step in.
Well, what's amazing is you knew the lines. It's like you knew the character, even though that hadn't been the character that we'd planned on you playing. And I have to say, one of the executive producers showed up on the first day and said, "Who is that guy? He's phenomenal."
Thank you.
So you really pulled it off. What do you think? Obviously, you had read the script before because you were the colonel's assistant in it. What do you think that you brought to the role that wasn't written on the page?
Hopefully, I brought just a sense of realism to it that transcends the page. Just because of my military experience and have been around it, I kind of know the way that we walk, we talk is, and the way we carry ourselves is a little different. And, if you've never spent any time in the military, you can take a script and you can look at it and you can try to prepare as much as you want. But when you've lived it, it's a different story. It's like, being a professional football player. I, as a layman, can look at a professional football player and think I can do everything they do, but I don't really know the ins and the outs of what goes on inside a professional football huddle or locker room or how they are with each other. And having spent time in the military, I think hopefully I was able to bring that to it and add to what was the script that was already written.
I'll tell you how I think you did, John. In addition to being prepared by having read the other lines in addition to your own, is that I saw that you were really connecting with the other actors, all the young guys there that were obviously, a few years younger than you. They kind of looked up to you and looked over to you for advice, and I think that was another way that you came prepared, was just by interacting with your fellow actors in a way that, it sort of commanded leadership, and that was really good for the role that you ended up in, being the sergeant, that you were the leader of the team there, I remember one of the interesting shots that we did, it was the fading light scene at the very end of that day. I think we even did it after we shot Michael Worth playing Riley.
Yeah,
Do you recall?
It's the scene that is, it's called O'Brien's Reprieve, basically, is the scene.
Right. You recall that, John, when you were walking down the street and the light was fading and we had you lighting up the cigarette?
I do recall that scene.
Yeah. What was going through your mind when you were doing that? Because I looked at your face from a distance, and I've looked at it since in some of the footage, and you had a real contemplative look in your mind, and I was just wondering if you could recall what it was you were thinking about. It just struck me when I saw some of the visuals that I had that question in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking in you know, this, once again, reflecting back to my time spent in the military and what, what's really going on in the scene. And we just found the cache and everything that had happened, and kind of this is the end of the day, and you're kind of, at the end of the mission, you're amped, and then there's this kind of release of adrenaline, and it's the end of the day, and you just know that tomorrow is going to be another day. And your goal every day is to make sure that you don't die and no one around you dies. And that's,
it's a really neat scene when you look at it visually in the footage, because we shot you from a long way away. The camera was about 100 yards away, and you're walking directly towards the camera. It's got a lot of power to it, man. It's really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a good shot.
Yeah, I mean, also, for a scene that has no dialogue, it was very powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, you guys have that all comes down to the script, an actor is usually only as good as what he has to work with. So, it starts with a good script, and if you can follow that, and you can, you've done any kind of training as an actor, hopefully you'll do justice to what's written.
And Lindsay brought up a good point about the cast of actors who were playing the younger Marines. They really seemed to bond and become like their own little band of brothers. Did you get that sense that was going on? And did you feel, because you're playing the sergeant and you're supposed to be a little bit removed from them, that you had to be conscious of that? Or did you feel like that you all had really bonded well?
It's interesting you say that, because I do, as you mentioned, I am a little older, and sometimes being older is in this particular case, it worked, me being older, and for that role, it did require somebody, had a little bit more maturity, at least in years, maybe not mature the person, but maturity in years, which I happen to have. And it's the fact that we did bond pretty quickly. I mean, Duke, Greg Duke, one of the other actors, had spent some time in the Marine Corps before he got injured. And so we had that bond, and some of the other, and it's just being able to talk. And we did form a pretty tight group. In fact, we all stay in contact with each other pretty regularly now. So it was interesting how that dynamic worked when you get, a team together who's got a team mentality, and they all were. They were all team players, all professionals, came ready to work. But there was this kind of bonding that happened, and I think a lot of it dealt with the environment we were in, the roles that we were given. It's just like the military. You're kind of thrown in together, and you have to get along, and it doesn't matter about race or age or any of that. You have to have the singularity of purpose in what you're there to accomplish, and everybody had that. Everybody, brought their own stuff to the table, but with the goal of creating, finishing this mission. And it did cause for bonding pretty quickly. It was interesting.
What we feel is a very important part of the story of these guys is what happens when they come home. A lot of the Vietnam vets that I've spoken to, and I'm sure you can really speak to this, being that you've had some in your own family, the big bum rap about the Vietnam conflict was that the American public was not very well capable or ready, let's say, to receive them when they came home, as you probably know. And I think that's changed a lot over the years ensuing. And I think that that's one of my own main motivations for making this film, is to try to get the word out to the American public. There are some really great personal stories here, and we want to support these guys. Do you have any thoughts like that about how our project can go a long way to doing something like that?
Exposing people to what happens in combat, it's another one of those fine lines. There's a lot of things that go on that the public doesn't necessarily need to see, because, for various reasons, because we live in a society where they don't have to, I guess. But at the same time, if you don't show these stories, if people don't understand what it's like and mentally, and what these people go through who are in combat on a daily basis or have made the ultimate sacrifice, we tend to separate it. Oh, that's something that never happens to us. And by telling these stories and showing what can go on and the effects of combat can have on somebody, hopefully it gives people a look behind the veil, so to speak. They get to see what Oz is like. And they get to realize that, hey, this is, a lot of people have family members who have gone off and served. And the typical thing when you come back from combat is you don't talk about it. You talk about it with your friends who've been there, but that's about it. You don't talk about it. So the general public, even if your brother or sister, your aunt, your uncle may have gone to combat, typically you don't know what they've gone through. So we have to, as a society, show what it's like. The only way to stop war in general is to expose people to what really goes on. Because then you start going, wait, this is horrible. Nothing good comes from this. Even when you're trying to accomplish something good, death is there, and destruction and the mental toll it takes. So I think we have to keep telling stories like this, and we have to keep exposing what the young men and women go through. And then with, hopefully at the same time it becomes an awareness of, hey, they've been through some extreme situations. There's going to be a effect. You can't just shut it off when you come back. That happens. Anybody who's ever gone through anything traumatic, you don't just shut that off. That never happened. That stays with you. There's lingering effects. And in order to adequately deal with them, you have to tend to be exposed to what caused those effects. So I think a film like that can do this. A film like this can do that. Expose them to, hey, this is what happens in combat. People die, people get hurt, people go through extreme things mentally and physically. And then we have to learn how to deal with that when they get back.
Let me ask you this then, and thank you for that answer. In another one of Laura's podcasts, she spoke with the esteemed military author Bing West, and one of his comments about the conflict in Iraq, and this is a guy who goes back a long way, by the way, was that he perceived after many years of having been involved in these conflicts and having witnessed these conflicts that there was such an advancement in technology that was present in the Iraq conflict that allowed for the guys to call back home on a regular basis. As we portray in the film, we have a scene all about that. That he kind of felt that, that perhaps it was interfering with their ability to do their job better or more correctly because they then were more preoccupied thinking about what they had just communicated or conveyed with or heard from their families because they could easily communicate with them. And you've been to Iraq, you've toured the country, you've seen how that has an effect. And do you think that that's an accurate way to describe the situation?
I honestly don't know. It's, the last thing you want anybody thinking about on a mission is worried about not coming back from that mission. And I think if you're thinking too much about your family, that can do that. There's anytime somebody's gone to war, whether it's Vietnam, World War II, Iraq, whatever, there's always the one question that a veteran gets. What's it like? What's it like? Well, honestly, it's quite simple. Being in combat is simple. You don't have to worry about anything else other than don't die today, don't let the person next to me die today. It's a very simple life. You're not worried about traffic. You're not worried about your cell phone bill. You're not worried about who cut you off. You're not worried about any of that. You're not worried about where you're going to sleep or what you're going to eat. All you're worried about is don't die, don't let somebody next to me die. So if you cloud your mind with other things that can make you hesitate, and if you hesitate when you're in the field, those are the people who usually get hurt first. So I don't know if that plays into it. I don't know.
And just to clarify, Bing West was talking about his most recent book and his most recent time that he'd gone back, which I think was in 2010 or 2011, that he was with that particular group, which obviously the technology has changed significantly from 2004 in Fallujah. I don't think a lot of the men had the same type of things going on that Bing West was talking about in 2004.
Sure. I mean, when I was there, we had access, we had internet access when we were, like in Baghdad or Phoenix Base or whatever, or DIZ or whatever, and there were, iridium phones and there were things like that, and there were times where you could call back. But, even in Vietnam, it was, people were always waiting for their letters from home and, World War II. So I don't, again, he probably knows a lot more about that than I do. He's been there more, I guess. But I don't know if it affects what you do or how you make decisions when you're in the field.
Going back to your role as O'Brien, do you think that you and O'Brien have any similarities?
Yeah, I mean, once again, I think him being an older person, when I joined the military, I was in my 30s. I was older than most of the people I went to boot camp with. And you come with certain life experiences. That doesn't make you smarter, it doesn't make you necessarily wiser, it just means you have more life experiences to draw off of. And I think O'Brien is that kind of character. He's a sergeant, he's been around. This isn't his first, the saying goes, it's not his first rodeo. And he's dealing with some kids, basically, 19, 20-year-old kids, if this is their first time in a situation like this, or out in the, in a really dangerous, hostile environment where it's not just training. So I think that, having, again, being older and having a little bit more life experience to draw from, I think that it was easy for me to kind of relate to the O'Brien character.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Well, we feel absolutely blessed that you stepped in as O'Brien and that you've been a part of Devil Dogs, and we can't wait to continue on and do the feature and the series. What else have you got going on? What's next on your radar?
Well, tomorrow I'm shooting. The next 2 days I'm shooting. I've got a role in an investigation discovery show, so I'm shooting that. I'm a detective on that. So that's kind of exciting. I'm always good when you're on a network.
Oh yeah, those
program.
are great projects.
And a 2-day call is always better than a one. So
what show is that?
Co-star. It's Tabloid, and it's crime reenactment show. And I'm fortunate once again to have been cast as a detective, one of the leads in that. So we'll shoot that the next couple of days, and then I have a project that I'm writing. That it's a series that I'm writing. It's a comedic series. And then, like I said, I'm talking right now about partnering with the same company of the guy that did Commando and Die Hard and stuff like that. I'm talking with his company about partnering on a project. So we're pretty excited about that. Hopefully I'll be able to announce it officially here within the next few weeks. So
that'll be great.
Like everything in Hollywood, people tend to there's a lot of talk, and then it all sounds great, and let's see when everything starts happening, and
Yeah.
Go from there.
When I was talking to Greg Duke on his podcast, he said he was so excited he'd been cast in Bewitched with Nicole Kidman and Will Ferrell, and he was on, and he shot for 2 weeks straight, and he told everybody, and then everybody went out to see the movie, and it ended up he was on the cutting room floor, and
exactly.
He said, you don't tell anybody anything. And
yeah,
so
you don't,
it actually is.
Right, you don't tell them until you've actually, you've cashed the check and you've actually seen the footage.
Yeah, right. So
and that's the business. It's you got to do what's right for the business, and sometimes your part isn't necessary to drive the story forward, and that happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no matter how good you are. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your stories, and for your time today, John. Is any last thoughts or words of wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience?
I don't know if I have any words of wisdom other than don't let anybody tell you can't do anything. Follow your dreams, whatever they are. If you want to be a table maker, be a table maker. If you want to be an actor, be an actor. If you want to write stories, produce, do it. You're never too old or too young to start doing it. That's the only thing that I would say to anybody listening is, follow your dreams, follow your passion. Screw what everybody else says. You only get one shot at this thing. Might as well do what you love.
Right.
Love it.
Well, it was great talking with you, John.
Thank you guys once again for having me a part of the project and on the show, and I'm excited to see what comes out.
Right on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.